Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast with your host, Andrew Langer.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire. I'm your host, Andrew Langer. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you know you can always listen to us wherever fine podcasts are found on whatever fine podcast platforms you find them. Please leave us a like, leave us a review, subscribe, let your friends know, let your family members know, let your friends' family members know, and your family members' friends know all about the Lunch Hour with the Federal Newswire. We are live this week at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C. And I love coming to CPAC because we get the opportunity to have on folks who we might not normally be able to talk to. And joining me right now is Coach Joe Kennedy, famous from the Supreme Court, the landmark Supreme Court decision, Kennedy versus Bremerton School District.
Nice.
Coach, listen, I appreciate you coming on. So, I wanted to start here. It's been a little chaotic getting set up this morning, as you know. And I asked this question, I'm going to ask it to you now. Let's start with this. When you have a high pressure situation that your players are going into, and how do you calm them down? I know you said it depends on who the player is, but talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. So every single kid was a little bit different.
Sure.
Some of them you just give them headphones and they blast different music. Some of them you give a little snack to, like Skittles or something.
Yeah.
Other ones you got to go for a walk, calm them down. Other ones got to go for a run.
Sure.
I have one special guy that he would have to throw up every time. And one of them would come over and say, "Coach, can you punch me in the stomach so I don't throw up?"
Jesus, okay. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to say that. Yeah. Wow.
It was different, but almost all of them just, had their little rituals.
So we're going to get into how you got into coaching and sort of the other things that are going on, but let's talk about this because it ties into the case quite a bit, which is, this issue of thanking God for his gifts, thanking Jesus for his gifts, the issue of prayer and having your players come together in prayer, how important that is. Talk about that.
Yeah, to me, it was just something cool. It was very natural. It was something that every American should be doing and could be doing anywhere. Right. And it started out just myself. It was my covenant with God. When I started coaching, I said I was going to give glory to God after every single game, win or lose.
Right.
And as the time went on, my players saw me out there and they asked, "Coach, what are you doing out there?" And I said, "I'm just thanking God for what you guys did."
Yeah.
They wanted to come out. I said, "Free country, you could do whatever you want to do." And over the years, it grew and grew.
Sure.
So this went on for 8 years.
Okay.
Never had a problem. Nobody ever said anything. In the 8th year, somebody saw what we were doing and gave a compliment to our principal.
Yeah.
That what he saw was awesome. So with any compliment, you want to do an investigation,
Of course, sure. Yes, that's all. Listen, I know whenever somebody compliments me on something that I've done, immediately I say, something, I got to investigate this. I got to open up an official investigation. Yes.
So their lawyers got involved and they always side on, the insanity.
Yeah.
Especially on the left coast, Washington. And
yeah, sure. Absolutely. Sure.
Crazy. And their lawyer said, "Well, I think we can navigate through this. Just stop praying with your team." And so I did. I complied.
Right.
I just wanted to coach football. I didn't care,
Sure.
My covenant was with God and me.
All right. Of course.
So I started praying just by myself. Now the other team came out and joined me. So what do you do with that?
Right, of course.
And there's only one policy in the state of Washington that you cannot encourage nor discourage.
Right, of
kids.
course. Yes.
So what am I going to do? Tell them that they can't come out?
Right, of course.
Tell them they can't come out as bad as telling them they have to come out.
Right, of course.
So I timed it on the next one. They gave me a letter and said that if you continue to pray in public, that we're going to give you a suspension until you comply with the school district's policies of not praying in public. And I said,
you can't do that.
Yeah. I don't know if you're aware of the First Amendment and what it says, the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. They weren't. I guess they weren't aware of that.
No. Well, I mean, right. There was a time when progressives in education had a fundamental understanding of what the First Amendment protected. And that seems to now be out the window.
Right.
So yes, go ahead.
So at that time I had to choose between my job and my faith. Well, that was an easy one because I always told my guys, every single time you do what's right.
Sure.
I don't care how tough it is, especially on Friday nights. I almost have these kids like, I don't care if your finger's broken. Get out there. There's still time in the clock. So fight through the pain and you keep doing it.
Right.
Now, this is my opportunity to set the example.
Fight through the pain, of course.
So I had to be the leader by example.
What I appreciated about your story, so I know it doesn't look like it. I know it doesn't look like it. I used to be a track runner. I was a skinnier guy way back when.
Both of us.
Yeah, yes. So, and I was inspired by the story of Eric Liddell. I don't know if you're familiar with it. No, oh my God. The movie Chariots of Fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So Eric, he was a Scottish runner. He was a 400 runner. That's why I ran the 400. And he ran. The point is, he ran in God's name, and they were attempting to get him to change his schedule. They wanted him to run on a heat on the Sabbath, a qualifying heat for the sprint for the 100 meters. And he wouldn't do it. And he essentially, was called in front of the Prince of Wales and other members of the Olympic Committee. And finally, someone said, a runner said, "Why don't you have Eric run in my race? That way he doesn't have to break his faith." And the point that the other Lord who gave up his spot said, you have to understand, his running is an extension of who he is and his faith. If he breaks that covenant with God, he's not going to achieve. Right? That's, he gives this impassioned speech early on in the movie. I feel God made me for a purpose. He made me for China. He was going to do, his sister wanted him to go and do missionary work, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. And to deny that would be to hold God in contempt. And I love that. It's so inspirational. So anyway, that's why your story was very intriguing to me, because again, you're absolutely right. You fight through the pain to do what's right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's a very long way to talk about this.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we took it to court and we lost.
Yes.
And lost 7 times in a row. It went to the Supreme Court twice. So
now, remind me,
8 years to go through.
Which of you had a public interest law firm representing you, right?
It was First Liberty Institute.
First Liberty Institute. Got it. Okay.
Out of Texas.
Yes.
And thank God I never had to get a bill.
Sure. Yes, of
because
course.
there's no way I could afford a loan to go.
And that's what they count on, isn't it? It's this idea of, well, you're not going to fight it. You're certainly not going to risk your job over it,
right.
But B, you don't have the resources to challenge us in court, God forbid. I mean, even though we're not, the federal government defending ourselves, we are a school district, have a lawyer on retainer who will represent us. We can grind you down, which is what they wanted, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they thought I would give up after the first time I lost, and the second and third.
Right.
But I knew what the First Amendment said.
Sure.
I knew it in the bottom of my heart. So it was absolutely worth fighting for, because there were so many people, that millions of Americans were like, finally, somebody stood up and said, enough is enough.
Right.
This is not right.
Yes.
This is over a 30-second prayer. This is not newsworthy. I don't even know how this made it to court. It is so insane in my mind that
this is the hill you want to die at. And I know a number of folks have gone down that road with First Amendment issues.
Isn't that crazy?
And you wonder about this. Really, this is where you're going to make your stand over this. But on the other hand, actually, maybe you could give an insight of this, because you started off making a joke, and I don't mean that in a bad way, essentially saying the principal got complimented and then started an investigation. What do you think so offended the principal? What do you think so offends the left about your expression of faith that they came after you full bore?
I wish I had that answer.
Okay.
I really do. I have, and I challenge these people to sit down with me.
Sure.
I did sit down with the local president of the Satanist group in Washington, who was, they came and protested one of my games.
Okay.
And I said, hey, let's sit down and have lunch.
Right.
He took me up on it. He ends up telling me a Bible story and joined my side.
There you go.
He understood that this was a First Amendment thing and not really a huge religious thing.
Actually, Joe, let's not move off of that, because one of my core values is the idea of it's important to sit down with an opponent. I mean, not that we're, not that like putting him in those terms, but let's just say for the sake of argument, an opponent. Was it over a meal, over coffee?
Over a meal.
Over a meal. To me, there's a value in that. Talk a little bit about that, about sitting down and having. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I invited him, and you always get these keyboard commandos that give you threats and everything. 100%. But I was really intrigued with this. I'm in a Church of Satan, really.
Yes, yeah.
So they worship in their own way, but why can't I worship in my own way? So I challenged him. I said, let's meet for lunch. He took me up on it. I took him to Noah's Ark of all places, which is our favorite hangout.
Nice.
And the name is perfect.
Sure, of course.
So we're sitting there and I said, go ahead, unload.
Yeah.
And he did. There was like double barrel shotgun to the face of everything that was wrong. And I wanted to understand why he was against me.
Okay.
And his concerns, he had a lot of valid concerns.
Sure.
Misconceptions about what I was doing, why I was doing what I was doing.
I'm sure part of it had to do with coercion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I had to just laugh at it because I was like, you know nothing about us. So it ended up where I told him what I did and had him talk to some of my guys. And man, that guy was totally on my side after that. It was so cool to see the turnaround.
It's interesting. Right. I mean, and the value in being able, it's very hard to, at the very least, oppose somebody full bore and be the keyboard commander when you've sat down with them and looked at them across the table, shared a meal and and had that open conversation. It's interesting to me because I've spent a lot of time on the radio talking about the issues of the Church of Satan and what that really is. But there is a fundamental misunderstanding among folks who are without faith about it seems to me that they don't understand that there are people who not only have faith, but have faith of their own volition, right? The idea of that it's not coercive, that there are kids who are being raised in religious environments, whether or not they're Christian or otherwise, where they are taught to pray and ask for help from the Almighty and understanding from some almighty power. Do you think it comes down to sort of this, if you're not raised in a culture of faith, not understanding what faith is?
I think
I know that's a really weird way to go around, and I'm sorry about that. I went to an ethical humanist high school, and so an ethical humanism is essentially faith without faith. It's really about ethics and it's like a form of Unitarian humanism.
Right.
So I've talked to a lot of those folks before. There's some of it's a lack of understanding, and then that lack of understanding translates into a real anger of folks who sort of have faith. For me, it always comes back to, listen, there's the Shakespeare quote, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio, which is, Shakespeare's way of saying there's a lot more out there. But if you're a rational person, as I am, right, and I believe in science, but I also know that there are things that we don't understand. Like, I'm a firm believer in the concept of the multiverse theory. And that, to me, that's the scientific understanding of the fact that there are other things out there, anyway, I don't want to go.
Anything is possible.
Yes.
Anything.
Right. So you go to the courts, the arguments are held, you win. I've talked to a handful of folks who've won at the Supreme Court. A lot of them most of them are very personal issues. What's it like the moment you get the call from First Liberty and they say, hey, we just heard? What's that like for you?
Yeah, well, I was actually sitting in the office with First Liberty down in Plano,
Texas. Good.
And Dobbs just came out the week before.
Sure.
So we were like, wow.
Yeah.
What do you do now?
Well, sure.
We all looked around stunned, and we gave each other a high five, and we hightailed it over to just right to what we're doing here.
Yeah, sure.
So we did 87 interviews in 3 days.
Sure. I don't doubt it.
And we didn't even get a time to celebrate.
So maybe I shouldn't ask this, I'm going to ask it anyway. Did you ever hear from the principal again? I mean, what happened with the school district? Did you ever?
So the principal, ended up, I found out how he really felt about me all these years. Wow. I thought we were friends. But the great thing is I'm still friends with the superintendent of the school district. And man, what a great man of God.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
He's awesome.
See, that's good. That's important to sort of get that closure. But so now I don't know this. So did you go back to coaching?
Oh, I did.
Good.
Yeah.
But in Washington or elsewhere?
Washington, back to the same school.
There you go.
Was I think I had to prove that to myself and face my giants, and that was one of the huge ones. And I went back to the school.
What was that like the moment you step back on that field at Bremerton and what was that like?
I want to say it was awesome, but it was scary. It really was. My heart was beating a million miles an hour, but I have to portray that tough guy in the coach and confidence.
Of course.
But it felt so good, and you feel like I was right the whole entire time.
Right.
And it just felt really good.
That's good. So let me ask you this, because I normally we come back to this. How did you get into coaching? What drew you to it? Talk about that.
So I just got out of the Marine Corps. I was
Semper Fi.
I after 20 years, I've retired. I think I'm home free. I'm going to not do anything.
Good.
So I'm out on a run. This guy pulls up alongside me and says, hey, I have a Bremerton Knights shirt on. And he says, did you play football for Bremerton? And I was like, no. I'm wondering why this creeper's talking to me.
Sure. And he said, the Marine kicks in, yes.
And he said, hey, can I talk to you? And I was like, yeah. So he pulls up and he's like, well, tell me this story about Bremerton. He was a brand new athletic director for the school district. And he says, tell me your background. I said, I graduated from Bremerton. My wife works at Bremerton School District. And
so you didn't play football for them?
No.
That's
football.
Oh my God. That's wild.
I was 10 into my sophomore year.
Yeah, amazing.
So he knows I got out of the Marine Corps and he says, well, have you ever thought about coaching? Because we need leadership, team building, and all the intangible things that Marines do.
I'm sorry, Coach Joe. I'm just going to say, it's not just that you have this relationship with God. You needed a coach who had never played football before. You needed that relationship. You needed that reliance on God.
You should have been at the opening interview with the head coach. They asked what my specialty was, and I was like, I really don't have one. He thought we were, this was a joke. He goes, why are we interviewing this guy?
Oh my God, that's funny. That's amazing. I don't know if has anybody asked you. That's a very fascinating part of this conversation.
It just goes under the radar the whole time.
But obviously, it was again God putting you in the right place at the right time because it was meant to be. This is, and so that was. Did you start praying on the field immediately?
Immediately.
So you were 8 years into your coaching tenure when this had happened, when this all came down. That is wild. So you were in the Marines for 20 years. And then you do this, and you grew up in Bremerton.
Grew up in Bremerton.
So it's in your. I mean, it's a gorgeous part of the country. Normally, when I'm interviewing policymakers, the same thing here. I was at one point going to do a podcast that I was calling Outside Interests, which is to talk to policymakers, politicians, and things about what they do when they're not doing the policymaking thing, the political thing. When you're not coaching, this is a gorgeous part of the country. Tell me about what you're up to. What do you do?
Well, I love to snowboard.
Okay.
So,
wow.
And we got the big mountains that are over there. Hunting, fishing. I mean, everything. Yeah. I love to be outdoors, mountain biking and everything. And a lot of times, football starts in March.
Of course it does.
And it ends in November. So that's a long season. Of course, yeah. And in those off seasons, I do take my guys up on the slopes, and we do have a lot of fun.
That's good. By your guys, you mean your kids, or you mean your students?
Oh, the students. No, I'm a terrible dad. So yeah.
It's funny. I took my wife out to the Pacific Northwest for the first time a year ago. We were going on a cruise, and we spent some time. I said, "Listen, I want to take you down to Mount Rainier." Beautiful. And it was, it is, you talk about these sort of life affirming moments. It was amazing. So what do I hear? There's a biopic coming out?
Yeah. So the book just came out a couple months ago.
Plug the name of the book.
Average Joe.
Average Joe, love it.
Very fitting. Well, I think I'm a little below average, but it tells my whole entire life story.
Listen, not to quibble, but Below Average Joe would have been a great title for a book. That would have been a great title.
Yeah, well, these guys want to title that.
Yes.
And we got done filming Average Joe. Also, it comes out in theaters this fall. That's and Eric Close and Amy Acker are the stars in it.
That's terrific.
It's so weird.
That's
so weird.
You know something? Actually, talk a little bit about that. What it's like to see somebody portraying you on the screen.
It was. I mean, I wish I had better words.
Yes.
We went on to the set and we met all the actors and directors and everybody. And it was just the most fascinating thing. So as you see it progressing, and we're talking through these, and they pick up on mannerisms. They share our story. Some of it I couldn't be there for, because it hit so close to home. This is the intimate details of your life. And then we just saw the trailer. We're showing the trailer this week.
Okay.
And I tell you, I lost it, man. I as a tough Marine, I lost it.
Right. I mean, but that's just it. I mean, yes, it's both you're reliving what I'm gonna say what was probably a traumatic experience. I don't know if you were ever under fire as a Marine. I mean, you're the Marine Corps,
Me and my guys went to combat.
So it's but there's something about having those convictions challenged in a way that is very traumatic, isn't it?
It is.
I'm sorry, you may not want to admit this.
No,
big, strong guy. So there you are. You're watching this and you're reliving all that. That's tough,
right? And it goes all the way. it really tells a story, an inspiring story that some guy who was unwanted pregnancy, was in and out of group homes, foster homes.
Wow.
Nobody ever wanted, was in most trouble in the world. How God could take the simplest of person, that you'd least likely guy, and do something with them. So imagine what he could do with guys like you and guys like everybody that's here.
Absolutely.
In America, if they just get off their butts and do something.
It's like the old adage, God created this great, big, beautiful world, and you still have a little bit left over for me. It's something to really consider. So you're coaching. I mean, you're going to coach until
I resigned from coaching.
You resigned. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
No, it took the fun out of it.
Sure.
The passion was gone after this whole ordeal. So now I'm just going around the country. I'm helping people with their First Amendment rights and getting them out there to vote and be active in their schools and their communities.
But that's again, sort of God putting in your place. I mean, I'm sorry the joy got robbed. I know, again, I've been sort of down this road myself, so I know how that is. But finding that joy is vital, and you're delighting in the Lord and in doing that, doing the Lord's work.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, I wish you the best. How do folks find out more about what you're up to?
Well, you could go to my website. I know it's not very original, but it's CoachJoeKennedy.com.
There you go. I like it.
And
simple,
it
straightforward.
will take you to it, where you could get the book, Amazon, all that kind of stuff. And man, I'm on Facebook everywhere.
Listen, the simple things are the best. One of my favorite monuments in DC is the aptly named house where Lincoln died. It's not called anything else. It's just, it is what it is. So CoachJoeKennedy.com is the website. Listen, this brings us to the end of yet another. Well, first of all, I'm sorry, Coach Kennedy. Thank you so very much,
brother,
for joining us. This brings us to the end of another lunch hour with Federal Newswire. Please, as I've said, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. If you're listening to us on one of those fine podcast platforms, you can also watch us on YouTube, especially an episode like this where we're at CPAC. You're going to want to do that. Leave us a like, subscribe, leave us a comments, and please tell your friends and family members all about the lunch hour with Federal Newswire. I'm your host, Andrew Langer. Enjoy the rest of your lunch.
This has been the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast, hosted by Andrew Langer. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream.